And for the audience, our next presenter is going to be Keith Goode. I'll give you a little background on Keith. He graduated from University of North Carolina back in '94 with a BA in Literature and History. And he started his career in technical documentation. By 2007, he had migrated more to the SEO side, especially in the home building niche at that time. And shortly after the beginning of 2011, he was the SEO tech lead at Dell. There's a rather impressive little notch in your belt, but it wasn't good enough for him. He
No.
followed that with a stint as the chief SEO evangelist for SEO Clarity. And then for the last 5 years, he's been the senior SEO strategist at the little company some of you may have heard of called IBM. So I think most of us have heard of those folks. And uh, and I understand you have a change in the making.
I do. And I'll announce that. Well, I guess I can say now. I did have a neat little segue in my slides to go through that, but yeah, I've made the decision to hop off the big blue ship and try to see how I fare in the automotive industry. I'm moving over to Cox Automotive. I'll be the principal uh, SEO product manager for one of their properties. So it should be a lot of fun. One of the things that I talk a little bit about in this presentation is that things move sometimes glacially in a large organization. I won't even say slow because slow would be really fast by comparison. So there can be times in a large organization where um, you are you're basically sitting and waiting for the changes you've requested to go through, and sometimes it's a hurry up and wait, and sometimes it just takes a while to get done, and then when it gets done, then there's the rapid uh, response that you have to have whenever there are any issues with what you've just recommended. So, you know, um, what can you do? So I'm really definitely looking forward to taking over SEO product management for this property, and really sort of flexing my Scrum Master muscles, so to speak. And yeah, that's where we are. Exciting times ahead, I think.
I have no doubt you'll set the world afire over there.
I think there'll be some quick wins, and I think that's always fun for an SEO because sometimes it can get really discouraging if you don't, if all you work in are the slow wins, the ones that you don't see for 2 years. So getting a quick win in there, it's a real ego boost. I think ego boosts are absolutely fundamental and necessary in a person's career. Um, so hey. I like change anyway, right? I said in my LinkedIn post from yesterday that in nature there is only growth or decay. There's nothing in between. So if you're not growing in your career, you're decaying in your career. And believe me, I've met plenty of people in my career who they uh, they're there to let their careers die.
Well, that's that Peter principle at play too. And
Yeah,
it is frustrating, I think, for all of us when you get into a large corporate environment.
yeah.
That glacial factor definitely comes into play because 42 people have to put their chop on each memo before
hmm
it can go to the next step, and it's frustrating.
And and
Anyway,
that's and that's if you don't have to deal with an org change in the process. So. Uh,
that too, yeah, which are almost perpetual in a large organization.
Yeah. Uh, you're not joking. I've gone through 4 in 12 months. So, yeah, man. Yeah, man. All right. So, are we ready to kick this off? I think we're at a minute after. Everybody that wanted to join should have joined, I think.
Yep, and the podium is yours, sir.
And the podium is mine. Let me go ahead and just double check and make sure that we get this all right. Groovy. All right, hey everyone. I do enjoy the virtual conferences. mainly because I'm able to sit here and talk to you and look like I'm well dressed. Meanwhile, I'm wearing gym shorts underneath the desk. I like to call that my Zoom mullet. Business up top, party down in the bottom. I don't know. Either way, that's one of the more enjoyable things about doing a virtual conference. Um, the other thing that I really enjoy is being able to sort of make sure that folks understand how to follow me after this, so that if you have any other questions, you can reach out to me. Sometimes people are sort of in a hurry an actual conference to get to the next room and see the next speaker, and they don't have a chance to really talk to you. So, feel free to reach out to me. I am at Keith Goode on Twitter, and I will engage with you if you engage with me. Just don't come at me, bro. All right, so here we go. Again, Doc went through a lot of this already, so I don't have to spend a lot of time on this, which is fantastic. I have I've been in online marketing for over 24 years at this point. I was doing SEO when I didn't know what it was. I just stuffed keywords at the bottom of the page in the same color font as the background. I've done that. I'll admit it. I think a lot of us SEOs who've been at the game for a while have done a lot of shady things that we're ashamed of. Um, and hey, it happens. But we're better. And in fact, in my roles as an in-house SEO, I have more and more uh, learned that you cannot engage in a lot of the activities that are considered black hat or even gray hat, because of so many legal challenges and that would sort of come your way should you do that. So, but in any case, yeah, I've been an SEO, an in-house SEO for over 14 years. Started out officially at HomeAway, and I've worked with several companies since. I was doing some content stuff back at AMD as well, so that sort of counts as SEO because we were optimizing for keywords. I've been doing conference speaking for, gosh, I'm coming up on 8 years now. PubCon, Deep, of course, Deep SEO Con, SEJ, and many others. But I also have a lot of side passions. I think that's important in life. You should do things that you enjoy doing outside of your work. And I enjoy mixology. I'm a fairly confirmed geek, a Star Wars geek, comic book geek, name it. That's what I am. And I've discovered podcasting over the pandemic, as you can see by the studio in my back guest bedroom closet. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun for me. I enjoy it, and I think hopefully you have something in your life that brings you joy as well. Little light housekeeping here. This is where I was going to do the segue, Doc. Little light housekeeping. Usually when I'm presenting at these conferences, I am doing so with the understanding that I am not here representing IBM. And it's almost never more truer than at any other time that I've said this statement, because as of tomorrow at about 5 p.m., I will no longer be an IBMer. But I am not Keith, or oh no, I am Keith. Keith is not IBM. None of my opinions expressed here are IBM's, and I have no forward-looking statements in here. There's no secret sauce. Nothing that I tell you is not already publicly available information. So let's go back to this. I always like to share this with folks, just especially if there are any folks on the call who are fairly new to the industry. And I always hope, beyond hope, that there is someone on this conference today who is just getting started in SEO, um, because you know, ideally, we're growing this industry, because certainly there are far more jobs available to SEOs than there are SEOs to take those jobs. I know this, just having done a very brief job search for the past couple of months. Um, you know, there are more than enough opportunities out there for folks who are willing to get into SEO. So I'm hope there's somebody here learning this. But my path to where I am right now has not been, smooth sailing. There's been some gravel roads. There's been some roads that didn't even have gravel on this journey. But eventually I got here, and I started out with, as Doc said, with a degree in literature and history, which has absolutely nothing at all to do with the kinds of technical work that I do now. But I found that to be true with a lot of SEOs who started out as journalists or literature majors, and then discovered they loved things about the internet, and the next thing you know, they're one of the most renowned SEOs in the world. I can name several people who wound up in this position. And of course, we have folks who were like, I have a friend named Ben Jariola, who's he was a chemist, so also nothing to do with the industry that we're in, but he's one of the most intelligent SEOs that I know out there. I had the fortune of graduating right at the dawn of the internet as we know it today. I graduated in '94, and I joined a company, New Era, and it was New Era Technologies at the time, who was on the cutting edge of trying to get everyone access to the internet. They had this whole brave idea of providing Wi-Fi citywide in the small town that I'm from, which, I mean, nobody was doing that at the time. Um, and so I gained access early on to, the internet and the awesomeness therein. But hey, listen, it was a rough and tumble time. I was definitely part of some of the first .com layoffs and some of the second .com layoffs. I think I've gone through 5 layoffs in my career, um, overall, and those can be demoralizing and sometimes humiliating, just because you think, "Hey, I'm really contributing here," and then they're like, "Well, we don't need you anyway." And that's just a part of being in the corporate world as it is. But hey, we grow, we learn, and then I think the key here is I've always had a desire to share with people what I've learned. Um, and so, I hope that many of you also put yourselves in that position, get yourself a mentee, become a mentor to someone, um, and really help build and grow what I think should be one of the most ethical industries out there, which is our SEO industry. So, what's my tech stack? I'm always asked this more often than I always answer. And you've already heard some of these names thrown out today. Screaming Frog, I think, has come out there a number of times. It's really good for quick calls.
Keith,
Yes, sir.
excuse me for interrupting. I was just we're wondering, were your slides supposed to be advancing because we're still on your cover
Oh,
slide?
I see. We're sharing the wrong slide here. Let's get on down here. Did you see that change just then, Doc?
Yes.
All right. So what's happened is, let me get back to this phase. Let's see, screen. Yeah, because I went into presentation mode and it apparently uh, duplicated.
Looks like you're going to have to do it manually.
Yeah, let's do this real quick. I'm going to escape out of here. We're back here to my journey. I'm going to hit presentation mode again. Let's see what happened on the screen.
Still showing journey slide here.
Yep. Sure seems to be. All right, so fun times. We'll do it the old this, and actually this happens more often than not at in business meetings at IBM, especially. People always forget to they always forget to go into presentation mode. So this is how I see most of the most of the presentations at IBM is in non-presentation mode. So are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. We're seeing the what's my tech stack slide now, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm behind the preposition since I ended that sentence on a preposition there. Yeah, so I do often get asked what is my tech stack, and so I would say for quick crawls, I always go with Screaming Frog. Large crawls, we use Deep Crawl, but then we also have a persistent crawler running across the site called Content King. If you have not heard of Content King before, I would check it out just because it's 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 really kind of amazing. It catches a lot of stuff that Deep Crawl doesn't have the um, I guess the priority to crawl. It kind of goes where you don't really expect it to, and it finds a lot of stuff that you don't think is important at first, but then you realize it kind of is. Um, backlink tracking, Ahrefs, and Majestic. We use that via an API through. Oh my goodness, I can't understand what happened to my spelling here of this platform that I wanted to spell out, but it seems to have happened across the page. I guess I'm just not promoting them. Um, anyway, for keyword tracking, uh, well, Doc, did you have some input on that?
No, I just thought maybe that was a Lithuanian curse or something.
More of a Tasmania glossolalia. Yeah, I think that's probably more what it is. Um, but for keyword research, I love Ahrefs. I absolutely love it. I use it almost every single day at work. Um, and I prefer that way over DataCube of this again misspelled platform that I apparently can't spell out here. Rank tracking, we use the Flabber platform. We've also integrated a lot of other elements like Airtable for basically aggregating our data across all of our rank tracking, our backlink tracking, any sort of other data that we want to pull in, we can pull into Airtable, and then we can, in our reporting, pull that through Tableau and provide some beautiful charts to our executives. And of course, Google Analytics, CMDP, Google Search Console. There's a number of ways that we sort of integrate everything into a single view through Pearl, which is a platform that we built at IBM specifically for our needs. And then, of course, technical analysis. I got to be honest, I use a number of things as I need them, but for the most part, I'm heavily dependent upon Google Search Console to sort of let me know where problems are, because we're going to start with Google first, right? Because they are 96% of the search market share. So, all right. As we get into this, I want to talk about the key takeaways that I want to get through with every. And I want to help opportunities that your leadership is most likely missing. I want you to know how to prioritize your work and justify the focus on SEO. Also, how do you execute a strategy across the entire organization, and in doing so, build alliances and embed SEO knowledge across all of the teams. So let's get into it. Part one. Let's talk about the default corporate model, and I'm going to be real honest with you here. I do apologize if I fall into ranting, but sometimes I will do that. I worked for some good organizations, and I've worked for some of the best organizations, and I've also worked with some really bad organizations as well. The worst are the ones who, they have no idea what the value of SEO is. They don't actually understand it. But they think they know SEO, and as a result, they expect really quick results from SEO. All the way at the other end of the spectrum is you'll get someone who, they know the value of SEO, they actually understand it. Um, they know that they know the value of SEO, and they expect results, but and it's certain because they understand the timelines involved with what's being asked. Those have been the best organizations that I've worked with, and sometimes you get the folks that are somewhere in between those circumstances. But I will tell you, most of the time, it's not the best organizations. Most leadership, most corporate leadership, especially the ones with the three little letters behind their name, MBA, they don't understand the value of SEO. They hire SEOs, but then they expect one-to-one, ROI immediately, dance monkey. And they aren't really quite sure how to get there, but they don't really spend the time to ask you how to get there. And these are also the same people who think, meetings are productive time. Here's an older reference lost on the younger generation. If you know who this is, you probably have some gray hair. This is Horshack from Welcome Back, Kata. But for a lot of the leadership who are in that category that I just listed, they're the ones for whom noise attracts attention. Those who report the most get the most attention. Those who speak up the most get the most attention. And I think that's one of the things that we've had to learn over the pandemic, by the way, is suddenly the introverts are showing how important they are to an organization, because ordinarily in a team meeting in a conference room, they're not the ones to speak up. They're the ones who sort of take the information back, they think about it, they mull it inside, and then they come back with something very sharp. Well, in the age of pandemia, when we're all on a Zoom camera, these are the ones who are able to effectively come out with the best feedback. And so some of those folks that are like, ooh, Mr. Kata, aren't able to, demonstrate the value that the introverts are showing. So, gotta love neurodiversity, right? And I think that's one of the things the pandemic has really helped with as a society. Um, you know, those who cheerlead the most get the most attention. So, what I want to help in this particular uh, discussion is toward the end. I want to help show you how you can go against maybe your better nature if you are in fact an introvert, and insert yourself and begin to understand how to relay how important SEO is. A lot of these leadership think that change is the only measure of success, and so I've talked to Doc here a few seconds ago talking about how we've gone through 4 reorgs in 12 months. And for those leaders, they think they have done something very important. They've renamed the department, they've switched new productivity models, they've updated the brand of the department, and they've aligned the teams, and they've over communicated about the change, and they've updated the marketing stack, and they tout how well they did this change, and then they start all over again. It just creates more churn than anything. So as and I'm not here to try to insult anybody with an actual MBA degree, but I will often joke that these are the folks who are actually causing the most churn in the organization by thinking that activity is accomplishment. And this is what we really have to, as SEOs, make sure that we avoid at all costs, is mistaking activity for accomplishment. So we have to get to the point of selling SEO from the top down with bottom up activities as SEOs. So let's get into this real quick. Oftentimes people ask me, Keith, let's just say it's day one. I'm new to my in-house role. What should I do? How should I proceed? What is the first thing I should do in terms of setting my expectations? What alliances will I need? Well, so I would say first and foremost, always take a breath when you first start at any organization. But at IBM, for example, I think it took me 6 months to get my feet underneath me. Um, so be willing to stop, take a breath, and understand, what can you control? And, as our former president, Ron Swanson, said, do what you can with what you have where you are. And I jokingly say Ron Swanson. I can read. It's Theodore Roosevelt, but he kind of looks like Ron Swanson, doesn't he? Um, so understand your political boundaries, and keep account of anything that you discover in your work that you don't have any control over, that you can then bring up later as you build those alliances over time. So for me at IBM for the next day, a little over 24 hours in this role, there's only so much that I can control. I can't control the developer site. I can't control the support site. I can't control the docs library. All of these are under other teams. The marketing pages that I have any control over make up about 13% of the 40 million pages that we have at IBM. And so I think setting that expectation for myself will help me stay sane. Otherwise, I'm going to drive myself crazy worrying about stuff I can't control. Also, Doc, keep me honest on my time. I have a stopwatch going here, but I want to make sure, I have a second person who's going, shut up, Keith, it's time.
We have some flexibility because we're going into lunch break after you anyway. So if you run 5
I
over,
am
it's not going to hurt us.
I am not keeping people away from their food. That's how you create enemies. Never mess with a person's rice bowl, as I've always heard. So when you start out, the temptation is basically you're going to run a site-wide audit. You're going to see a whole lot of stuff that are problematic across the site, and you're going to go, look, boss, look at this entire list of things that are wrong with the site. And maybe you're even content to say that's your strategy, but you can't do that. An unprioritized audit, they're a dime a dozen. I've seen so many agencies send stuff over to my executives saying, we've audited your site. Here are the problems with your site. And the executive sends it to me and they go, is this really problematic? Is this, are all of these problems really, that important? And of course, it's unprioritized, and they haven't told them what's the most important thing, what's affecting our site the most. And these are sometimes even people that we hire. So sometimes audits are even bought and paid for. And because they're given to people as a flat list of problems, and they lack context and understanding of impact, nobody acts on them. But just imagine, each of these little yellow blocks is a post-it note with a problem. If you present this to an executive, they're not going to know where to start. So it's really important that you provide a framework of understanding for any audit that you do when you first start out. Think of your site and all of the problems related to the site from a what I usually term the URA SEO framework, the usability, relevance, and authority. Usability are generally your technical elements. Relevance relates to your content, your media, any other elements related to the user experience. And then, of course, authority, which can be links, both internal and external, as well as your brand perception, social media presence, etc. And once you start to look at your problems through that lens, you can then break everything down into the appropriate um, category based on your audit discoveries here. So you might discover a large swath of very technically focused elements versus things that can be fixed with your content team, and then other elements that you might want to work with your PR team on. And then that's when you need to begin to understand who is responsible for what. So usability, your teams are always most likely going to be your information architecture team, your dev, maybe your webmasters. And these tend to already be sort of an agile um, type of organization that you'll need to plug in. You'll need to sort of build your user stories with, and then monitor your progress through. Your authority will probably most likely be your digital PR, your PR team, as well as maybe your social teams as well. And this can be a little bit more restrictive as your brand gets bigger. They tend to be very, very protective because there's so much to protect, especially with a brand like IBM, especially with a brand like Dell. You do not mess with the company's brand as an employee. And so there are certain processes you have to go through with that. And then, of course, with relevance, that's going to be your content and your brand team as well. These tend to be more tactical, and these are going to be elements that are, you fix it on one page and you probably fix it on one page and not many other pages. So that's why I tend to consider them more tactical. Once you have identified the teams for which each of these elements in your audit affect, you can then work with those teams to to see what's possible over any period of time. Ask them, what is the baseline for getting work done, and then you can take them through each of the tasks and say, well, what would you assign it? So prioritization is a super important key. I like to use the Fibonacci sequence, but a lot of people like to use the t-shirt sizing. So they sort of compare, like, okay, if it's something you can get done with one day's worth of work, or half a day's worth of work, that would be sort of an extra small t-shirt. If it's one day of work, maybe that's a small. Maybe a couple of days, 3 days, that's a medium. And then once you start getting into, it's going to take me 13 hours to get through this, then you're starting to get into the um, you know, extra large, XXL. And honestly, the best part about doing this is you're letting them tell you what's possible. Never make an assumption about work when you're going through your audit and coming up with how long it would take to get done, because you may not know. You may not know all of the hurdles that person needs to go through, or how many different technologies they have to work with in order to get the change that you want. But once you get all of that information, plot out your work in a prioritization matrix. So many people see this and they're absolutely surprised that you can do this, but you can. This actually, I think, originated. I was trying to find the origin of this. Is known as the LOE LOI matrix, the level of effort, level of impact matrix. And I want to say it was Stephen Covey that came up with this matrix related to time management. And then I think people sort of stole it and riffed on it and came up with this particular matrix as it relates to the kind of work that you can do in a technical organization. And basically map out those tasks, and you can actually literally use sticky notes to do this on a whiteboard. Map it out and figure out, okay, what are the elements that are of low difficulty but really are going to have the highest benefit to me? All right, those are my quick wins. what are the elements that are high difficulty and high benefit? All right, well, those are my incremental items, and I can work on those, over the next couple of years and make a big impact. Um, what are the elements that are of low difficulty, but they also have low benefit? That's going to be my busy work. So that might be just, I don't know, changing page titles, for example. And then you've got your money pit items, which are high difficulty and low benefit. Maybe you need to do them, but you could probably do it over a course of 5 years. But I certainly wouldn't make those a high priority. It's really up to you to direct your activities based on what will drive the most results for the least cost and the least amount of effort. You and this is why technical SEO is so important because uh, obviously you want to focus on the activities that are a fix once and affect many type of scenario. Whether that is, you're fixing a template item or whether or not you're fixing an entire CMS problem. But the key here is to make sure that you're not just taking a list of audit items and then going one by one by one by one, and thinking that that activity is going to make any difference. Any difference because as we've already said, activity is not necessarily accomplishment. So work with those teams to accomplish what you'll need to accomplish on this list, but let them help you determine what's going to be the greatest benefit. And of course, some of you may be looking this, and if you've worked with dev teams, you'll recognize it straight away. This sounds like agile, Keith. Well, yeah, it is, because well, first of all, I am a certified Scrum Master, thanks to my time at Dell and also at IBM. But what I've found in the past is that when you take on the philosophies of agile development and you apply those to your marketing efforts, you'll find that that incremental effort makes a big difference. A lot of folks are still stuck on waterfall. And waterfall is basically like we've got a big idea, we want to implement this big idea, and then we want to get to the outcome. And so what ends up happening is we say what we want, we work on it, we might test it, and then we deploy it, and it might take us 6 months to get that done. That's waterfall development. Agile development is like, well, we want to have a series of activities that we can do over time that will build, small, maybe imperfect aspects of what we're trying to to work on, but then we can perfect over time, and that is agile. And I can tell you, this is really an important thing to do. I can I now go back in history here. 2013, we were on waterfall at a certain company. I won't name which one, but the CEO who was super smart from an SEO perspective, believe it or not, it was a large company. Um, Googled the company and knew how to do site operators and discovered that we had a far too many pages. And he wasn't wrong. I don't usually like to say too many pages because I think we can work on it. But it became a big mandate for the corporation to reduce the pages across the site. So one of the projects that we came up with to fix this at the time was we realized there was a huge part of our site that had highly parameterized pages all across the board. So as you can imagine, if you've worked with parameterized search pages, duplication is a huge problem sometimes. And we didn't have canonicals on those pages. So we implemented canonicals, except we gave the recommendations to the we gave the a recommendation to the um, development staff. They took our recommendations and 8 months later they gave us the implementation. The problem is they misread our requirements. And when I said to them that yes, a canonical can be self-referential if it is in fact the canonical source of the content, they took that to mean that all the pages could have a self-referential canonical. So we didn't fix the canonical or the duplication issue at all. In fact, we made it worse. And this is before Google got to the point where it could sort of fix issues that we caused. Um, so that was 2013. A little bit more recently, what we discovered was that over a period of time between January 2020 and September 2020, we lost over 1 billion backlinks to IBM. Some of you might be shaking your head and you're like, you had 1 billion backlinks to begin with? And I was like, yeah. At one point we had 1.9. And 1 second, the person is pinging me and bothering me. So 1 second. All right. Yeah, so we had 1.9 billion at one point. The problem was I didn't know where all of these were coming from. I sort of had an idea that some of them were spammy. I didn't realize how many there were. Um, but what we ended up seeing was that loss of over a billion backlinks resulted in a decline of ranking and traffic. And two massive changes that we had asked for that were implemented at the same time were the cause of this massive loss of backlinks. So the first problem was, of course, video.ibm.com. It was the old Ustream.tv that we acquired and then neglected. And then there was also community.ibm.com, in which spammers had discovered that they could set up profiles, and we allowed HTML in those. Well, guess what? You could sell backlinks out of those, and they did. So two of these, the two of these problems combined resulted in us having just a lot of backlinks coming into us, going to these spammy pages. It's kind of funny how Black Hat SEOs with their link building schemes actually link back to the link building scheme pages. It's you think that it would be the other way, but they did it anyway. So we sent out the request to both of these teams. Again, not under our purview. These were not under our control, and we said we've got to do something about these links, these link spammy pages. What can you do? They said, "All right, we'll go take care of it." Well, guess what? They both took care of it within a week of each other. And suddenly all of the spammers were like, "Oh, wait, we cannot just um, keep linking to these pages, so we're going to kill all the links that were going to these spammy pages." And so we lost over a billion backlinks. What's funny about that is we learned, of course, never just hand off your specifications. Always, always QA, but see if you can incrementally implement what you're trying to get changed, measure it, adjust, and then refine as you need to. And I think that would have saved us a little bit of time. But what was interesting about this whole thing was Google even told us even a billion extremely spammy backlinks lost can result in ranking losses. It's just that's the nature of the thing. Now, eventually, we got back the ranking and we got back the traffic, but it's just interesting how that many spammy backlinks were enough to trip up Google. Uh, so that's why I tend to promote Agile. But back to where we were before, we as SEOs have to continually prove the value of SEO to the executive staff. Um, we have to reset that expectation of quick turnarounds that has been there. Now, and of course, sure, if you got a quick win, you're probably going to have a quick turnaround and get great ranking improvements and traffic improvements. Fantastic if you can do that. There aren't that many quick wins in the world, though. I got to be honest with you. And understand your API or your KPIs. Ranking is only one of those, and if you're only focused on ranking as your KPI, you know, um, you're going to miss the KPIs that really matter. And honestly, if you're not measuring revenue, you should be measuring revenue. But it can be everything from traffic to engagement to CTR. There's any number of other metrics that you can be using as your KPI to your executives. Ranking is only one. Otherwise, you're going to get an executive who says, "Oh, yeah, SEO. SEO is keywords, right?" I wish we were in a room together so I could see how many of your faces nodded in agreement with that. But I've had so many executives say SEO is keywords, and I it drives me crazy because I want to say yes, keywords are important to us, but they're not the only metric. So, and then finally, as an SEO, set the expectation of many small wins rather than one big win. I want to talk a little bit about one of the elements that we got involved with from a content side. I know I'm here to talk about SEO, but how we prove value as an SEO to the organization was we actually worked with our paid teams to fix a really big problem that we had for the longest time. And Nava and I talked about this at a previous conference, and she said that it's not as big an issue now as it was then, but at the time we had a lot of our ads that were targeting keywords that were irrelevant for the pages that they were being landed on. Or worse, the PPC ads, were going straight to forums and with no content on the pages. And so it was just sort of like a form dump, hey, you clicked on our ad, give us your information. And it was really, really bad situations. And so um, they called in our help as SEOs for us to help analyze the content on each of the pages. And then also to provide them with any sort of situations that were really stupid, like, dumping someone at just a form. Um, and at the time, we don't really have BUs anymore at IBM, but at the time, each of the BU marketing teams had its own budget and could target whatever they wanted with whatever money they wanted. Um, and most of the time, we were seeing quality scores of under 5, and it was all because the content was irrelevant to the ads themselves. The SEOs went through, made a ton of recommendations. We actually stripped some BUs of their marketing budget until they fixed some of their problems, and we proved value. We were able to save money by actually implementing good SEO for these pages, for one, but also then good targeting from a PPC perspective. And then at some point, we proved it well enough to where the executives were like, "Look, you now have the ability to strip the budget of any team that's misusing their PPC funds." And so that's a really good way that we were able to prove value from an SEO perspective. And so later on, when we had other SEO projects we wanted to get funded and prioritized, they were willing to take a look at that. So as Martin said, a rising tide lifts all boats. It's kind of funny that we both are saying that today. Um, Technical SEO is one of your greatest undertakings if you can get prioritization. Again, this is all about fixing it once and you fix it 1,000 times at the same time. And you commit one template change and you fix page issues across the board. Um, the other thing that you can do is, with executives especially, you're having to sell up all the time, is you got to appeal to their pride. And you can use a SWOT analysis, uh, share of voice analysis, any sort of content gap analysis, even a visual analysis. Just walk them through a SERP and go, look at our competitors compared to us. This will make all the difference in the world with an executives who oftentimes just looks at your reports. They don't go out to the SERPs. They don't take a look at how we're performing or why we might possibly be performing poorly. Sometimes they don't even look at the content on our site and see, wow, this is marketing jargon hell. This is IBM speak hell. And if they just took a moment to do that, they would see the problems that obviously the pages are having. So this is really where we can come in and we can appeal to their pride as IBMers or as whatever company you're at, and say we can do better than this. And here's the problems that we have right now. This is how we can fix them. And SEO obviously is at the forefront of fixing a lot of this stuff. By the way, all of these reports here, uh, congratulations, have an MBA. Just giving you everything in the MBA program. All right, so part 3. Let's talk about building an SEO team when there's an international shortage of SEOs. Anybody try to hire SEOs recently? It is nearly impossible to do that because there are far more SEO jobs available than there are SEOs to fill them. So I would, Eli Schwartz has spoken about this quite a bit as well, but I would say it's almost problematic for our industry that we have so few people to fill the jobs that need to be out there. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can expand within our organizations and educate within our organizations to build what we need rather than having to hire an SEO to do that. So I have always been an advocate of educating folks. It's one of the biggest duties that I've had in the past 3 or 4 jobs is to educate people where they are in their discipline to understand how they impact SEO. It's important for us to do that. It's also important for us to make sure that we provide ongoing updates to that knowledge that we're providing to the folks. We should show them how and if something that has happened in the news impacts them directly. So, sometimes you'll teach people SEO, and they'll go out and they'll start following Barry Schwartz, and they'll see all of the the panic-inducing news that sometimes he comes out with, and they'll go, "What is this affecting us?" And we have to sort of go, "No, that's for probably people who have problems that are on their site that we don't have." And then also reporting regularly is a very important element. So if you have in fact uh, trained your development staff on how to code in a way that is friendly to SEO. Report regularly to them the impact that their efforts have had. And you really need to show them, just depending on wherever they're affecting it. It could be crawling, it could be indexing, ranking, or any of the useful responses that Google has. But if we have any sort of barriers to success, we should point that out to them and let them know this is what we need to fix. Um, so and I don't want to spend too much time on this particular slide, but this is really kind of how I break it out for them. So it's the same as me taking that blanket list of problems that I discovered in an audit and categorizing those into the appropriate disciplines. It's the same when I'm taking a look at problems across the site as well. Like, okay, this if I'm taking a look at a technical SEO problem, for example, my question is it affecting the crawling of these pages, the indexation of these pages, or is it getting down into where it's affecting ranking at this point? And then I can, sort of understand how to measure out or estimate what the impact would be to benefiting that change. Once you've done everything, the ideal scenario is that you're all sort of rowing in the same direction. You're a well-oiled machine in which your dev and tech teams are making sure that they're coding properly, that the rendering of JavaScript is happening in a fast and speedy period of time. And that everybody and every aspect of the site is adapting to technical advancement. Meanwhile, your content team, they're focused on proper merchandising. They're actually writing great content. They're building the content for the users. Your PR and marketing teams are doing the best they can in terms of promotion and outreach within the industry. And then your C-suite is helping sort of drive that corporate vision for the company. And then meanwhile, SEO can sit back. We can focus on continually auditing the site, doing analyses, educating the staff, and staying up to date in our own industry. There's so many times I've worked with SEOs who don't follow SEJ every day, or they don't follow SE Roundtable every day. And so they don't stay up to date, and they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was happening. I've been so heads down on my work. Well, that's because, maybe they're doing work that a content writer could be doing instead. So, but the key here is that, working with everyone in your organization, you can remain visible. If you are invisible in a corporate environment, you have no priority whatsoever. So it's very, very important that you not only build that culture of education and continuing education for your disciplines, but that you also build a culture of meaningful reporting. Everybody wants data. In fact, IBMers are the worst at it. They want data whether they use it or not. We have a glut of data. It's too much. So we have to, get to the point of where we're asking them why they need data, and then we begin to target our reporting by audience and focus on data that is meaningful to them and that is actionable, rather than just giving them a blanket Excel spreadsheet. It's kind of pointless to them. And then tie their actions to what matters most: money. Always present problems with solutions. So when you're building out your reports internally, think about these keywords as you're building those out. Whether if it's an individual contributor that you're sending stuff out to, whether it's an individual writer who wants to know how their content has impacted rankings, it's very tactical. That's the keyword that you're focused on here. So you're talking about page level ranking reports, individual burn down charts for developers. And down the list here, if you get to the executive part, hopefully you're going to be reporting to executives. Make sure the keyword that you think of is summary. It's share of voice stuff. It's revenue. It's traffic and engagement. It's not ranking reports. That will just drive them batty. If you give them too much information, I think I say this in the next slide. If you give them too much information, it will distract and it will frustrate them. At best. At worst, what you end up doing is that you end up giving them a rabbit hole down which they can crawl, and they can get obsessed with something that's unimportant. So you control the narrative to the executives, and you are responsible for making sure that narrative is as either specific as it needs to be for an individual contributor or as summary focused as it needs to be for an executive. So in conclusion, I think we're coming up on time here. So you can all head off to lunch very momentarily. I want to make sure I go through our key takeaways here. So the key here is, finding the opportunities that your leadership is most likely missing. And if your leadership doesn't understand SEO, well, this is your perfect opportunity for a quick win with them. But you have to get to the point where you understand how to prioritize your work and justify the focus on SEO. And you can't do that if everything is sort of equally important across the board. It's our responsibility to sort of whittle down the most important audit aspects that our leadership needs to take on. And then once you're able to do that, you can execute the strategy across the entire organization. And you do that, I'm a big fan of Agile. You do that by working within the Scrum teams to build the user stories that are, actionable and will have results almost immediately if at all possible. And, that'll help you build alliances and embed SEO across all of the teams in your organization. So that's me. I do want you to follow me at Twitter if you get a chance. I also want to thank Doc and Steve on this effort. I know that running a virtual conference can be very challenging. I don't know of any virtual conference that I've been a part of that hasn't had challenges to date. So, it's funny. We're a year and 8 months into this pandemic, and we're still trying to figure it out. I think, and hopefully, Doc, next year you get to do some deep sea fishing. You get to, enjoy some time, FaceTime with some of these people as well. So,
Well, I hope you're one of them, Keith.
I do too. And I listen. I don't know if you can notice my skin tone here, but I don't do well in the sun. So, I'm gonna be dressed up like Marlon Brando in that Island of Dr. Moreau. Where he's all in white and he's got so much sunscreen on his face it looks like he's painted himself white. Yeah, that'll be me. But yeah.
Well, that was a great presentation, Keith. You gave me some flashbacks. I
Hope
answered
it
to
was.
the
Hope what.
BU manager at McDonnell Douglas before they went tits up, and dealt with this on a daily basis, and it was extremely frustrating to me. But which is why I left before they actually
Yeah.
folded.
Yeah. Well, I hope I didn't give you any PTSD flashbacks.
No, not quite that bad. Just unfond memories.
It happens, I think, in every organization. I've had people, and I have people that I'm absolutely going to miss at IBM. I think they're fantastic people. They're super brilliant, and I have some people that I never want to see again, and I probably won't because they will let their careers die at IBM. And it's been the same at Dell. It's been the same at everywhere. So
And I would like to take a moment to apologize for my mass quantities of profile spam that may or may not have existed on the IBM website back in the day.
We got you though. We found you out.
Yeah.
Great presentation, Keith. Really appreciate the time and effort you and all the rest of the presenters, of course, put into it. And we don't have any questions. I think that's probably because you covered it so well. But
I hope so, and I hope that some of my jokes landed. You guys, tell me, you guys know who Horshack is, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I was already old when he was born, so. Well, we're going to go to our lunch break now, but before we do that, I also want to